Hello, everyone. I'm Tamara Banks, and this is Dialogue Denver DA. Mitch, always great to see you.
Great to see you, Tamara.
We have a really great guest.
Yeah, we do. We have the State Executive Director of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Fran Lanzer. Fran, we've worked closely with on a lot of different projects, but the most recently we've been able to, with his help, primarily his work, get felony DUI in the state of Colorado, which has been a very important step.
Let's talk a little bit about that, Fran. It passed into law officially June 1st, but it was, August 5th that it became, in effect, a law.
Yes.
And so now you can be charged with. So talk a little bit more about why it's important to have this particular law. The fourth time you're stopped and charged and convicted of having a DUI, that's a felony at this point, from here on out. Why is this law important?
Well, it was important to us because we work with hundreds of victim survivors who either had a loved one taken from them or suffered catastrophic injuries from a repeat offender. And the hard question that we get from them is, how did this happen? How did our state let this happen? Why isn't something more done? And so we really wanted to see that there was something more done, that DUI didn't just continue to be a misdemeanor no matter how many you had. We wanted to have a point where we said enough is enough. And really those victim survivors who worked on the bill, I would say that the credit really goes to them for making it happen, because they had such passion and dedication to being at the Capitol and making sure legislators passed this.
Because I can imagine, I mean, it's terrible if you're a victim of a DUI, but if it's somebody who's done it the first time, that's one thing. But when you see somebody, I think I've read that there's some people in double digits that have DUI misdemeanors, and then your loved one is that 16th time or the 17th time, and that person, your loved one, is killed. And 15 times before that, that could have been prevented.
I think every case to begin with, every crash is tragic. With those crashes that are caused by 6, 8, 10, 11 time offenders, it's like insult to injury. That something more really should have been done, and why doesn't our state care? And so we really wanted to make sure that we, again, had that point where we said enough is enough.
This has been an ongoing process, and Fran's a younger man than I am, but when I started in the DA's office in 1983, we started talking about how this is a crime that can be prevented. We can save those people that are being killed on our highways, that are being maimed on our highways by people that are drunk. And we started, the law started to get stricter, and we started to get the word out that, there isn't a lot of crime you can just flat out eliminate. This is one we can eliminate. If people understand that if I've had a drink, if I've had 2 drinks, I just do not get behind the wheel of a car. Right. That's what it takes. And so we started that work. The law got stricter, it got stricter. Then it got stricter again not all that long ago, but it always stayed a misdemeanor. And it always amazed me that you could kill somebody drunk driving. You could maim somebody drunk driving in this state, and they were always these low-level felonies. So we went to work there first, and we got those raised up. Now it's a Class 3 felony, which is a high-level felony to be involved in a vehicular homicide with DUI. And it's a Class 4 felony if you hurt somebody seriously and you were drunk. So we got those kind of in the place they needed to be, but it was extremely hard and frustrating. And then Fran came in, and last year they were able to raise up DUI to where it really needs to be. And I think Fran can talk to you about some of the compromises they had to make. Dealing with the legislature is the most frustrating part of my job. It is like a circus up there. And you have, and my wife always says, well, who would be up there lobbying for drunk drivers, for people that have driven drunk that many times? There are people that make a lot of money off of people that drink and drive, and they were up there. They wanted it to stay a misdemeanor because they make a lot of money defending people that continue to get drinking and driving type offenses. And so Fran had to face all of that, and he's probably the best to ask about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I imagine, on behalf of the lawmakers, part of it might be dotting their I's and crossing their T's, but, from your perspective, probably what feels like a lot of hoops to jump through. Can you kind of walk us through the process and, maybe not every minute of it, but some examples of what you did to not just elevate the awareness of DUI, but then also change policy to this point?
Well, it was really interesting bringing in, victims who hadn't had any experience with the legislature before. They tend to think of it like, Schoolhouse Rock. How does a bill become law, and it passes the House and the Senate, and then it's signed. That makes it sound pretty easy, but we actually had to go through 10 different votes to get the law passed, or get the bill passed by the General Assembly, and then the governor had to sign it. So really 11 steps, and at each step along the way, the bill could have been killed. So we did, I think, a really good job of showing up to committee hearings and educating legislators. But in between all those votes, we were really reaching out and explaining to them the importance of felony DUI for repeat offenders and why we needed to have this law. And so much of that behind the scenes work, that's how it happens. And that's, it can be extremely frustrating. It's usually a lot of standing around and waiting, and then all of a sudden the legislator's there and you get a second to talk, and then you move on. So we really had to have a lot of patience and determination. Really thankful for all the victims and survivors who were there and helping to make it happen.
And punishable by imprisonment, how many months or years?
Well, it's a class 4 felony, so that I think the max is, 6 years on it, potentially 8 years. It depends on if the judge finds aggravation or not, so obviously that. But it does not carry a mandatory sentence. So if people are concerned about that, so a judge can say, okay, now you're a convicted felon, I'm going to give you probation. Or now you're a convicted felon, but I'm going to send you to a halfway house instead of to prison. So there isn't that kind of mandatory jail time that we've always had on DUI. If you get a DUI, that's your second DUI, there's a mandatory jail sentence in the county jail. A third, there's a mandatory jail sentence. So, Fran can tell you, he worked extremely hard last year, the year before and it failed. It failed by like one vote. And I remember seeing Fran, and he was kind of like, next year, we'll get that one vote. We go through that again. And so this is not something that was easy, and it was not something that just happened. It took incredible amount of work to it. So now we have it, and now we can correct it, or we can change it, or we can say, okay, if the person gets probation, they have to get 90 days up front in a facility that has treatment around that. So we can start to tweak it, we can start to work it. But he broke the ice. He got it done. So now we can work to improve it. And that takes maybe another legislative session, or we come down, or somebody tells us, hey, there's something here that's wrong. We've already had the judges weighing in on it and saying, it doesn't really fit in with the other DUI kind of scheme that we've had here for a long time. Well, it doesn't, because Fran got the job done. He broke the ice and got it to the point where now it's a felony, and it should be. We can start to work on it further to make sure it's a good law now. We can make it a better law.
How many years did it take you, Fran?
This was the third year that we worked on it pretty intensively.
And how do the other states fare on this issue?
Well, where we're at now, we're kind of in the middle. So there are some states where it's as few as 2, and then there are states where it's as many as 5, and then there are 4 states that have no felony DUI level. So most states are really around 3 and 4. And so what we began with was
convictions.
Yes, three or 4 DUIs. Yes. What we started out with was the idea that we would make it 4 DUIs in a lifetime. On your 4th one, it would become a felony, or on a 3rd, if it was an aggravated charge, whether there were a prior involved a crash, or if those 3 were in 7 years, so really close together. So we started with that, but as negotiations went along, the cost estimate was pretty high, so we had to trim it down a little bit. So it is just 4 DUIs in a lifetime where it becomes a felony.
I'm sure it's too early to tell if this is having an impact since it's only been a couple of months, but can you predict and sort of have a sense, based on what the other states are doing across the country, that this will have an impact on the number of DUIs on the road?
Well, we did a lot of research looking into other states and not what their law was, not just what their law was, but what happened afterwards. And looking at the two most recent states to pass felony DUI, Georgia and Washington, the 5 years after they passed the law, they reduced drunk driving fatalities by 33%.
Wow.
And I think that that combination of having felony DUI, having again that enough is enough point, but also working on the prior offenses, making sure we've got a strong ignition interlock law. We've been fighting for those for years, and we have one of the best ignition interlock programs in the country.
Can you describe what that is?
It's basically an in-car breathalyzer for someone who's had a DUI. So they have to blow into the breathalyzer, into the ignition interlock, just to be able to start the car. And then there are rolling retests, so it's not as if someone can pull up to a bar and leave the car running. And there's actually a lot of the new models, I think they're going to all cameras on them as well too, so they can make sure that the person who's driving and who's using the ignition interlock is the person who had a DUI.
And the other thing is not just all alcohol. I mean, obviously we are the marijuana state in the United States, and Denver's the Amsterdam of the United States. So we're talking about more than just alcohol. We're talking about impaired drivers. And impaired drivers are dangerous. And we see that. And so hopefully that when we see over the next 5 years, that factor that now Washington is another one of our recreational marijuana states. But we are seeing an increase in crimes like hit and run, those types of things. And so when we have we see the decline of people that were getting killed by drunk drivers, and then it starts to go back up. You add another substance in there that people are using and then driving. I mean, it's an important message to get across. And I think that we'll see that where they're impaired by something else, but that's a conviction towards the bill that Fran got passed. So it doesn't have to be alcohol. It's somebody that's out there operating a motor vehicle, either they're unsafe to drive or they're impaired in the slightest degree, and that's the law in Colorado. And if that's the case, you should not be behind the wheel of a car, because the chance of taking an innocent person's life is so great. It is just not worth doing.
The fourth time convicted, just to remind our viewers, of DUI, it's now a felony. I understand that MAD also really focuses on the victims. It's not just about changing policy. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's one of the key parts of our mission is to support victims of drunk and drug driving. And actually here in Colorado, we provide support to victims of hit and run as well, because so often it's suspected that the driver may have been under the influence, but with a hit and run, it's hard to tell. So we provide support to victims and survivors at no charge, and we provide it to them for life. While the court case is going on here in Denver, our victim advocates work with the victim advocates in the Denver District Attorney's Office. We really work in a complementary role, so we can help with filling out victims' compensation paperwork, helping to prepare victim impact statements. But then after the court case is over, it's not like everything goes back to normal. Right. The victims and survivors still have to live with the impacts of the crash, and because we provide our services for life, we're able to stay there, connect them to other people who have been affected, to provide emotional support and to continue to support them for as long as they need us.
Another important thing they do is they go then out and talk about the impact that this had on their families and had on them. And they talk to people where it could make a difference. So they may go to the penitentiary, they may go to an alcohol program that people are there for level 1, level 2, and somebody that actually lost a loved one is there talking about it. We partner with them on those memorial signs that we put up across the city, and sadly we put up over 110 of them now around the city of Denver. So people driving around Denver that see those blue signs that say in memory of, don't drink and drive, and see that red ribbon, which is MAD. MAD helps us with that whole program. and families request those. We just put one up the other day. We put them up when the weather's nice. We do a pigeon release. There's usually a victim advocate from MAD there that's established a great rapport with the family. They do a candlelight vigil for families, and I try to get to that every year. I remember last year there was a blizzard, but those families came out, and it is a moving thing to sit and watch these people that were just innocently taken from their families for no reason. And you look at the young people, sometimes the children, and it's a hard thing to sit through, but it's something that these families understand, they've lived through, and I think it's people need to understand that. So when you've had that drink, just don't get behind the wheel. Call Uber, call a taxi cab, do those kinds of things. Plan your evening.
Right.
I'm not driving tonight because I'm going to drink tonight.
Right.
You know, I'm going to have fun or do whatever you do with alcohol, with marijuana, but plan it and have a safe way home. That's all this is about.
And I understand that part of the conversation with the policy was also taking a look at treatment for the suspects. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was something that was brought to us early on in the process, looking at the legislation. Unfortunately, the bill would have just cost too much to really put a lot of treatment into the bill. However, there were a couple of important changes that were made. On a second offense, a judge can now order up to 5 years on ignition interlock, as we were talking about before, those in-car breathalyzers. They reduce repeat drunk driving offenses by 67%, according to the CDC. So that's a key countermeasure. And so now, before it would have been 2 years, now it can be up to 5. And then on a third offense, even though it's still a misdemeanor, a judge can actually order someone to community corrections, a halfway house, where there would be more supervised treatment. So there are some things going on in a second and a third offense. And even just, I'm a part of several task forces looking at this issue, and I would say there's a big focus now on making sure that, someone who gets one doesn't get another one, and much less having someone get 3 or 4.
Right.
We really want to make sure that, well, one is too many to begin with, but we're really taking a look at our treatment options as a state to see what we can do.
Gotcha.
And a judge sentencing someone to prison even under the felony, the language that's in this statute says he has to determine the person is not amenable to treatment. And they provided Denver, the state did, with some money to pay for a magistrate half-time to develop a treatment type program for individuals that have got the felony. Because I think they recognize there's going to be some judges out there that are going to say, oh, yeah, I understand you got 4, but I understand I'm not going to put you in prison. This then gives a judge to say, okay, you're amenable to treatment, but what kind of treatment are you going to get? So our concern in Denver was that maybe they've been through some treatment before, but we want to make this a serious situation. If a judge is going to give them treatment, it's going to be treatment that is going to work. And you can't guarantee that, you never can. But if somebody goes to the penitentiary, say they get 4 years for this, they're going to be back on the streets, able to drive drunk in a year. 4 years is about a year. And people need to understand, you get a 6-year sentence, you're going to be back on the street, able to drive drunk in less than 2 years. That would mean you leave your halfway house and drive drunk. And I've seen people drunk in halfway houses because they jump the fence, go to the liquor store, come back and get everybody in the facility drunk. I tried a murder case where everybody was drunk. So what we thought is, okay, the hammer is prison and this felony. Can we get these people serious about treatment? Can we get them through a good treatment program so in 2 years they're sober and they're not driving drunk? And it took some convincing from the judges that got this money for me to even consider treatment for these folks. But I think the reality is if you don't treat them, even if you send them to the penitentiary, they're gonna drink and drive again. And the next time they may very well kill a loved one or a child or something like that. So we are seriously putting together a rigorous treatment program for even these people with 4. We're going to give them potentially a break to not be a convicted felon. We're going to use those misdemeanor statutes to have a serious impact on them with that felony and that prison time over their head, and try to get them through treatment. If they've ever hurt anybody in their priors, if they've ever had a weapon in their criminal history, there is a whole list, and I've sent it to Fran, and Fran and I have been talking with the judges and everything about this program. They're just not going to get an option. I mean, prison is going to be it. And if they don't want this program, the judge can say, well, wait a minute, the DA offered you this and you didn't want it, so you're not amenable to treatment. You're going to the penitentiary. These are hard cases to win for the defense.
Yeah.
The one thing we have done is educated people real well about drinking and driving. They haven't necessarily stopped them from doing it, but jurors understand it. And we get conviction on these cases. So these guys are headed to the penitentiary if they're not serious about treatment.
Otherwise, what's the point? Because you've
Right.
just wasted a lot of money, not to mention the lives and future lives that may be at stake.
And then they're on to 5, 6, 7. I've seen people with dozens of felony convictions in my career. I know
Lord.
a couple of these people that have 11, 12 felony convictions. I grew up with them.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about the Victim Impact Panel. What is that? What is that about?
Well, it's an educational program that we provide to people who get a DUI, and
Okay.
it's court ordered, and so by the time that someone is coming to one of our programs, they've already been through court and been sentenced. But the idea is that we show them the victim's perspective, and we do it in a way that it's not judgmental, it's not shaming. It's these are some of the realities of drunk driving, and these are some of the impacts that it can have. And now, we will say, if you're here, you're lucky that a cop stopped you and you didn't kill somebody or injure somebody.
Right.
And when you go back out this door, we want you to make better choices. And then for our victim speakers who come, it's actually can be healing to talk about their experience and to share their loved one's memory. So we really have dual purposes, and it's based on a restorative justice model. So we have interaction between people who've committed crime and a victim, and to have them both experience some healing from that process.
It sounds like it could really make a difference in that next drink that someone's thinking about taking. And I know, Mitch, this organization means a lot to you. You've been involved with the walk that happens every year.
Yeah, we have been the leader in law enforcement groups, so against the State Patrol, the Denver Police, anybody that wants to enter into the fundraising aspect for WALK, like MAD, they have to take us on. We are the smallest agency probably of all the agencies that get involved, but we raise the most money every year, and for 9 years running, so hopefully we'll hit the decade mark next year. And I'm real proud of the group that does that for us. Josh Thurman did it, and then he went on to another job. Ashley Beck and Maya have done a phenomenal job picking it up. In fact, their first year, we raised more money than any other law enforcement agency in the United States.
Wow.
Not just Colorado, not just Denver, in the entire United States, to help support MAD. And it's a great, you bring out the kids, they have water, they have food, you do the walk around Sloan's Lake, it's Saturday morning, it can get a little warm, it did this year, but it's at a time we can do that. There's a helicopter there for the kids to see, there's balloons, there's face painting. It's a real, we all know why we're there, but it's a fun event. People bring their dogs. And then I got to tell you that Fran came up with the idea that as you're coming back at the end of the walk, there's posters of the people that have been killed. And they're pictures of high school graduation pictures, and they're happy times. And it really kind of drives home the fact of why we're there, why we're supporting MAD, and why MAD is such an important group. And I know on a lot of these shows I make that pitch to support nonprofits that make a difference.
Right.
MAD is one of those, and anybody that wants to do that, I guarantee you MAD is not going to turn your check away.
That's right. You
They
can
need your
literally
help.
save a life.
That's right.
Thanks. Fran, thanks so much for being here. Keep up the great work with MAD. We appreciate you being here. Fran
Thank you
Lanzer
very much.
with MAD. This is and closing part of our Dialogue Denver DA. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tamara Banks. We'll see you next time.